Hello, everybody. I'm Dr. Laura. Welcome to another episode of Where Work Meets Life. Today, I am thrilled to have Kaleem Clarkson on the show, and the two of us are going to talk about fighting the good fight for workplace flexibility, why remote work can't go away. So I met Kaleem at South by Southwest this past March. He did a presentation, a panel around remote work, and I couldn't help myself from going up to him afterwards because I myself had spoken in the past on the same topic area, and it turned out we were really like kindred spirits. We had been both advocates for remote, flexible work for many, many years. Let me tell you about Kaleem. He's a husband, father, remote work advocate, and a speaker like myself. He's chief operating officer of Blend Me Inc., which is a consultancy that helps startups and small businesses transform into high-functioning remote or hybrid remote workplaces by improving the remote employee experience. He's been featured all over the place as a thought leader in Harvard Business Review, CNBC, Fortune magazine. He was named one of LinkedIn's top 10 voices in remote work. Way to go, Kaleem. He's listed in the top 15 remote work advocates by the All-American Speakers Bureau and named as a 2023 top remote work influencer by remote.com. So Kaleem has spoken all over the place to companies you might have heard of, like Google, United Airlines, Facebook, Visa, HP. But above all else, Kaleem is passionate about work-life integration and the remote employee experience. Welcome to the show, Kaleem.
Oh, Dr. Laura, thank you so much for having me on the show. I appreciate it. It always feels, I don't know, a little flattering to hear your accomplishments in the intros. I'm sorry. I have a little bit of ego. I'm sorry. What can I say?
Well, humility is a trait that is really needed in this world today. So thank you for being a humble human being, Kaleem.
Yes, humility. I could use some, but yeah, it's been a fun ride. Thanks for inviting me.
I'm just honored you're on this show. I know that you have the Remotely One podcast, which I had the honor of being a guest on, and we'll mention your podcast in our show notes. Really, really proud of what you're doing, my friend.
Dr. Laura, you were great, by the way. It was fun. We laughed. So everybody check out that episode. It's not just because I'm on her show right now. She's actually a trendsetter. So check it out.
Money is changing hands behind the scenes.
By the way, there has been $0 exchange, right, Dr. Laura? Like we are just out here hustling.
Totally.
No, there's been no exchange of financials, just envy and what you've been able to do. So it's been
and we're both trying to make a difference in this world, in this landscape. And what I've been seeing is a lot of companies calling people back to the office. I had a brutal commute today, and I blame it partially on that, with so many one driver per car going into a cubicle in downtown Calgary. And it's really, I think, a shame that we're losing some of the traction that we gained during the pandemic around remote work. What do you think, Kaleem?
Yeah, it's really frustrating, right, Dr. Laura? Like, I don't know. It's when you think about what we were able to achieve from March 20 until April 20, 30 days, and the whole world went remote. Like in just 1 month. So on one side, you have this remarkable ability for business leaders to transform and adjust and be agile. It was probably one of the best examples of being adaptable as a business leader. And now, just because, in my opinion, of nostalgia, what we call leadership nostalgia, shout out Tyrion for that term. Give you some props there from Slack's Future Forum. But leadership nostalgia, in my opinion, is pretty much the major cause of why everyone is being forced to return to the office. And it's just really disappointing that with all of that innovation, all of that ability to adapt, that so many organizations are just throwing all of that away. So, yeah, I'm frustrated.
Yeah, no doubt. So leadership nostalgia, that's really interesting. Tell us a little bit more about what that looks like and what you mean by that, Kaleem.
Yeah, yeah. So, again, it's not my term, but I love it. Tyrion from the Slacks Future Forum and Brian Elliott, they did a great job in that initiative. But how she kind of describes it is, leaders love the way things used to be, right? That's how they knew. And I've been trying to gain a lot more empathy. I think that's one thing, humility, a little more humility, a little more empathy for some of these leaders because they don't know any other way. That's how they moved up the ranks for the past, I don't know, we've been doing this for well over 100 years. But like a lot of leaders today, that's how they moved up the ranks. They went to the golf course, they played golf. They, were the chummy person in the office a lot of times. Like that's how they were able to get ahead. And that's all they know. So there's a little bit of, I'm having a lot more empathy for those people, but leadership nostalgia is just basically going back to the way things used to be because that's how comfortable you are. I think it's been proven to work before, and we won't get too political in this podcast, but we've seen previous presidents kind of use those slogans of the way things used to be as nostalgia, and let's get back to that because today is different than that. So yeah, I think leadership nostalgia, I mean, it just kind of basically means what the two words are, right? Like, I like the way it used to be, so let's go back to that,
I agree. And I think it's also fear, right? It's fear about losing, right? Losing profits, losing productivity, losing control, right? It's fear as well as nostalgia, I think.
Well, also it's kind of interesting because don't they play together? Like kind of, I'm trying not to keep using the previous presidential administration as an example, but like it's a tactic.
I don't know who you're talking about.
Right. We're not going to say names, but y'all know who I'm talking about. That's a tactic, right? Like, let's go back to the things the way they used to be because I'm fearful of what they could be, right? Like, I don't know what the future holds. So let's hang on to something that we're familiar with. And that's what I think we're really seeing right now.
Exactly. So this whole remote area, Kaleem, I want our audience to hear how you became a thought leader. What propelled you? What's your why around being an advocate for remote work?
We're kind of, I consider us kind of location cousins because I'm originally from Maine, grew up in Maine. And for people who don't know, Maine is the whitest state in the United States, like 96% white or something like that. So as a minority growing up in that state, like there were a lot of advantages that I learned, but there were a lot of challenges for myself. And my partner and I, in probably late, around 2006 or so, decided to move to Atlanta, Georgia, which is completely opposite, right? We went from probably the least diverse state to one of the most diverse states. And it was during that time here in Atlanta, Georgia, the first few years we went home to visit family. We still have family that live there. And I finally understood what the Salt Life bumper sticker meant. I never knew what the heck Salt Life, the bumper sticker, I saw them everywhere, but I never understood what they meant. Like, do you know what I'm talking about? There's a bumper sticker. It's like a fish and it says Salt Life on it. And I'm like, what the heck do those mean? Well, basically it's living on the lake. It's, well, not the lake because it's not salt water, but it's like living on your boat, right? Enjoying that. And when I first got a chance to go home and experience Maine as a tourist for the first time, I was like, wow, how great would it be to come home and stay here for the, I still call Maine home, sorry. How great would it be to go back to home, Maine, for the whole summer every year? So that was kind of the beginning of the thought process. But it wasn't until 2012 when I went out to a conference in Denver, DrupalCon Denver, that I saw a leader speak about how he took his company fully remote and how their culture and how he felt closer to his employees than ever before. And their clients, they were a web agency, a web development agency, and they had big clients. MarthaStewart.com, I think they did their website for. The Grammys did the website. The company was called Lullabot. The session that I went to, and Matt Westgate at the time was the CEO. He was giving the talk. But it was that talk that made me realize, oh my gosh, this is possible. If this company is doing this and they have those types of clients, why can't we work remotely? So my partner, she got her master's degree from the University of Connecticut in organizational development and human resources. So I approached her and say, hey, why don't we start our own company helping remote companies only? And that's when we started Blend in 2013. So we started Blend as a side hustle in 2013 to help remote companies with internal communications and people operations and HR. And, pandemic hit, and I decided to leave my full-time engineering job to do Blend full-time.
Fantastic. And it's amazing that you can work alongside your life partner as well. Not many people are able to do that.
Yeah, it was a lot of people have asked, so who is your partner? I was like, well, she's my partner. She's my business partner. And I've actually had some interesting conversations with people like, hey, we're trying to get to understand, is this your business partner or your significant other? And I was like, well, it's my business partner. And it happens to be my significant other. So if you haven't had an opportunity to work with your significant other, I think there's a lot of attraction there when you realize that your significant other is a professional. And I think a lot of people during the pandemic got to see their partners in that professional setting where you may have never seen them. We've been together a long time, and it wasn't until, she was getting her master's degree where we realized, I was like, wow, you're really smart. So yeah,
Oh,
yeah, I was like, cause you don't actually see your partner in a professional setting. Like, how do you actually see your partner in a professional setting? It's difficult unless you go to their job or you work together. So I think a lot of people experience that during the pandemic as well, being able to see your partner working.
totally. My partner husband of 25 years, I should add, that just happened. I can't believe it because I'm only 30. So
Congratulations. Yeah, you got married when you were 5. I get that.
he's in a career transition, and he started some creative work from a long time executive career in the energy industry. And we actually formed a company together. And I haven't told many people this, but it's called P3 Productions, and it stands for People, Planet, and Purpose.
There it is. P3.
P3 or P cubed. So yeah, maybe we'll have a similar journey working together like you and your partner, Kaleem.
It's not easy. It is not easy. Well, let's just start with that. It is not an easy thing, but when you're creating a business, you have to build something with someone that you trust. So who else do you trust more?
Beautifully put. So let's talk a bit more about the trends that are happening. And I felt like I started off on a little bit of a pessimistic note about all these cars on the road and such. But overall, obviously there's the dark side of everyone must come back to the office full time. But there's also other stories of success going on. So I want to know what trends you're seeing and successes that you're seeing, Kaleem, in this whole remote work advocacy.
Yeah. One thing that's not getting a lot of press, and I guess I would like to kind of preface this to, your listeners and your audience, as far as the companies getting the press are very large, recognizable companies. And they have budgets for making sure they're in the press. So while yes, some of those headlining stories are kind of telling a little bit of what's happening in the business landscape, they're not telling the full story because it's a lot of businesses out there. Okay. And one thing that I don't think has been covered at all is how remote work has impacted the nonprofit sector. And, as a consultant, Dr. Laura, we're out there trying to work with clients and, work with different companies and organizations. And personally, nonprofit work was my first love. I started a charity in college. We booked concerts all over the country and we donated money. One of the reasons we moved to Atlanta, we got to work with like some great artists like Trey Anastasio from Fish, Dave Matthews Band, Bela Fleck and the Flecktones. So we did some cool stuff. We did a documentary on that we premiered at HBO Studios. So like that was my first love, but I also knew how hard it was. Like I thought that once we got our 501c3 status, that we were going to get all this money and grants were going to be coming in and companies were going to donate all this money. And that is so far from the truth. All 501c3 is an IRS designation. You are still a business. So personally, I was like, no, I don't think we need to approach any nonprofits for blend consulting work because their budgets are minimal. They're low. But what we've recognized, this year I was fortunate to be the keynote speaker for Make-A-Wish Foundation. And recently for CMMB, which is the Catholic Medical Mission Board, I was able to speak for them as well. And those are two nonprofits. And the reality is that, and I also had another opportunity to speak in Alaska for like the nonprofit association up there, but unfortunately I couldn't make it. I think Chris Dyer did that. Shout out to Chris Dyer, big fan. He was able to kind of fill in for me. But that's 3 nonprofit speaking opportunities that paid pretty well. And what most people don't realize, right? Yeah. And what people don't realize is that when you're in the nonprofit sector, every piece of savings matters. Well, Make-A-Wish Foundation decided to become a remote first organization, and they had over 200 people at their retreat, and they're getting rid of all their office space because it's a budgetary hindrance for them. And it's worth saving that money for them so that they can give more wishes, right? So I would love to know, and I'm going to definitely reach out to GuideStar, because I would love to know how many nonprofits have decided to go completely remote first from their experience during the pandemic and understanding how much that they can save. So this is a huge story that I have not seen one person write about. Hint, there'll be a blog coming out soon. But I think that's a trend that I would really love to look into. And then the last thing, just kind of like to mention as far as trends go, small businesses. Like, what are small businesses doing? Because we're seeing a lot of news in the headlines, but we're also seeing a lot of these office buildings vacant. So you have all these forced return to offices, but when you look at the stats, they're not actually working. They're not working. They're not working. Amazon's buildings are still empty. They're trying everything. So, yeah, I would say those two things. Nonprofit sector, would love to know how many organizations are going fully remote first. And then as far as the return to offices go, I'd love to know what small businesses are doing because of the ineffective policies of these forced return to offices.
Wonderful. Well, I can't wait to read your pieces on that and hear you speaking and podcasting on that, Kaleem. I liked your article on Amazon's return to office mandate. And you talked about how their decision was not based on evidence. Can you sum up the risks of their decision from your perspective for those who haven't read that article?
Yeah. So just to kind of preface the article, basically, one of the senior VPs at Amazon admitted that they have not seen any data that indicated that they need to return to office. Like there has been no presentation of data that says we're not as productive, people aren't working as much. So I just found that very fascinating. And I kind of call bullshit on this. Like the reason why is because Amazon, they are one of the most data optimized companies in the world. When you can order something on Prime and it gets there the same day, like there's so many logistics, hence why they're just selling their platform, right? Like they have data. I just find it very difficult to believe that they don't have data on productivity, office swipes, engagement since they've gone remote. Like if you're Amazon and you have data that shows that remote work is not good, why wouldn't you publish it? Like why wouldn't you publish the data either way? Because I know you like if you don't have it, that's a huge miss. Like that's a huge miss. If Amazon isn't collecting any of this data, like I don't know. I would assume somebody should have to get another job, right? That's like Uber saying like, oh well, we don't collect how much time it takes you to go from point A to point B. Of course you collect this information. So I just kind of find it very difficult to believe that they don't have data that supports whether remote work is efficient or less efficient. I can't believe that.
Or they don't want to see the data because their deep ingrained fears are so scary, right? That even if the data says one thing, well, there's that, but I really think we need to be together for our collaboration and culture and blah, 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 and get your butt into the office, right?
Or another one that we haven't brought up. I think this is, and again, I have no inside information. This is I'm just like a person on Sports Center, just talking. I'm a talking head right now as far as because I have no information. But I would assume that it has to deal with their corporate commercial real estate investments. Amazon has a lot of space, warehouse space, office space. They have a lot of space, and that's an investment. So if you invest in this thing, one day your building is worth $100. Today that building is probably worth $40. So how do we make the value? If we were to sell our assets, we would be losing money. So how do we increase the value of our assets? And I think this is what's driving a lot of corporate decisions. How do we increase the value of our assets? Well, we got to get people back to using them back into downtown and making real estate scarce so that the value of our assets goes back up to when we purchased it. So that's just a huge take with no information, but I couldn't see any other reasons, right? Like why else?
Yeah, yet we know that office buildings are one of the top carbon emissions culprits. A lot of people think, well, no, it's transportation, but office buildings are even more so based on my understanding and what I've seen in the data.
Construction, I think construction, what they give off for gas. Yeah, I've seen that before too as well.
Heating them, cooling them, a lot of the offices sitting empty for goodness sakes. And then add to that the single person in a car situation in major cities.
On the flip side, right? Just read an article recently about New York converting some of their buildings, and they've actually, I think their first conversion is already leasing space. It's not done yet, but they're already taking people for leases. And so maybe, just maybe, Dr. Laura, out of all of this, we can start seeing more housing available in these downtowns. And maybe that's a change. And, maybe those corporate assets, the value will go up, but they'll become livable assets. They'll become residential assets. So maybe it changes.
No, that I appreciate that. And it's about staying positive and continuing to fight the good fight. So how do you do that? How do you stay positive during this marathon of working against the dark forces that are against remote and hybrid work?
The Death Star, right? Right. I think what you are doing, Dr. Laura, and what we are doing with the podcast, telling stories. Recently I won some organization put together like a set of awards. I mean, everyone's kind of doing that now. I think they're on the hustle, right? Create an award, and a lot of people will go to your site. But somebody I won remote work storyteller. And I never really got into the podcast or got into remote work to become like a quote unquote storyteller. But it was just a really interesting take on how someone saw me as a professional. And I don't mind it. I'm actually pretty cool with it. Like, yeah, I want to tell stories. And Rick, our co-host, he's like, oh, I want to be the voice of remote work. I was like, there we go. Let's go. You are the voice of remote work. And so I think telling these stories as much as possible is the key, because people need to hear all of the variations, from the CEO stories that are successful and the founder stories that are successful, to the managers that are managing teams, to the consultants and advisors and speakers like us, to even to the individual contributor telling some of their stories. So I think that has been very uplifting. That's all we can do, right?
Beautiful. And you'd say that's been a lot of focus of Remotely One, the podcast?
Yes, and that's why we created it, and that's why we tried to add a little bit of humor, where we're asking every guest, tell us about your most comical story you had while working remotely, because we want to highlight the human aspect of remote work, because it's more than just a job. It's not just about, are you productive? And that's what we're seeing a lot with all these studies. Which one's more productive? Which one's not? Blah, 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 blah. And it's like, didn't we learn anything from George Floyd? Didn't we learn anything from, I Can't Breathe? Like, it's more about humans. Like, if you are normally making $100 and then you decide, you know what, I'm going to care about my employees a little bit more, and we're only going to make $90. Like, we're going to lose money. Is that such a horrible thing? Right? Like, we're working the whole world's like this. It's not just the United States anymore. Like, the whole world has kind of started taking on this grind. Like we talked about on our podcast. Yeah, Canada's a little bit more work-life balance associated, but everyone's kind of doing, like, everyone is just trying to produce more and more and more and more globally. And sometimes, like with the pandemic, there was a moment there, because we're coming off of those horrible incidents that happened in the US, that everyone started caring about the human again. Oh my gosh, you got sick, like you lost a family member to COVID, or wow, like, that George Floyd's really having an impact on you going to work, because like, you're scared for your brown child driving at night. We became kind of human in 2020. And now I just kind of feel like, oh, back leadership nostalgia. Yeah, yeah, you're having a tough time. Yeah, yeah, yeah. What are your numbers like? And I just feel like, the person is what is the most important in this. And sometimes business loses that sight.
And it's organizations that are human centric that's the ones that tend to perform better in the end, ironically, right? When you're thinking about this nostalgia.
So much data on this, right? And it still doesn't hit home always.
No, it doesn't. But good for you to, present episodes on your podcast about this very topic and to share the data. And I just love following you on LinkedIn. So thank you.
Remote Work Wednesdays. We try to put something out every Wednesday.
Beautiful. Remote Work Wednesdays. Today's a Wednesday. We got to check.
Yeah, I got to post something.
Actually, when this comes out, it'll be a Tuesday, by the way. So the next day, you'll have to look up Kaleem Clarkson. I ask all my guests about, well, the topic is about the intersection of where work meets life, and wellness is at that intersection. I know you like the term work life integration. So let's use that term, Kaleem. And how does it play out in your life?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. So a long time ago, my partner and I were watching something, some TEDx, some talk, and they were talking about work-life balance. And geez, this must have been like 2010 maybe. And they said, well, you're not two different people. Like balance generally means, the yin and the yang, right? Left and right. Now I get it, you can be balanced, right, and even, but it's very difficult to be a work person and then be a personal person. So we started researching and we noticed a few people were using work-life integration. And really the differences, and we have a blog on our site kind of talking about the difference, is that, we're one being. And for some people, work is their life. And that's okay. Like, I feel like we're kind of in this thing like, oh, you need more than just work. Not for everyone. Some people, they have their connections and, they are really attached to, and they get satisfaction from their job. So when we were kind of looking at this idea of, well, do I call this, is it bad for a parent to be at their child's soccer game and at a timeout answer an email? I don't think so. It's basically, we're all talking about optimization. It's optimizing your day so that you can do more things. It's not left or right. It's together, right? Like we're merging this together. And the reason why we're doing this is that we want to be able to have those moments with our family, with, ourself, maybe you're single and you just need that time mentally, but like you're making a choice of how you're organizing your day. So we're just real big firm believers that you're one being, and integrating your day the way you feel, the way you see fit is really what we're all looking for, in the freedom that we all had an opportunity to experience during the pandemic. I have a meeting at 1, let me go for a walk from 11 to 1. I have a meeting at 9 a.m. Let me go to the meeting and then let me go read to my kids' reading day at school. That is integrating your day.
I hear you loud and clear. And yeah, I love that term too. And I do not like the term balance. I don't think it sets us up for a feeling of ever being balanced.
Right? I think I never thought of that either. Like even just saying the word balance, doesn't that mean, I know a lot of people say balance is not equal, because I've had this like debate before, but like when I say balance, I think equal right off the bat.
Exactly.
Like I need balance, equal. And for some people, that's not the case.
Just in wrapping up here, Kaleem, what do you read and listen to for your own development? So one book and one podcast that you just love.
Guy Raz's How I Built This was just the best podcast ever. And I don't know what's happening with Guy Raz. Hopefully you're okay out there, Guy. But they were just such good episodes and stories, just telling stories of how leaders built their company. Like I'll never forget the CEO's story from Kaleen, one of the best stories. So I love that podcast. I'm a Harvard Business Review junkie. I'm sorry. I subscribe to the magazine. I read their articles all the time. And I'm now really getting back into going to, events in person. So I would say those are my main 3 pieces. And then, what's the pod, I obviously have some junk podcast on there for entertainment, what's the Jason Bateman, Will Arnett, and Smartless. Smartless is one that I enjoy for fun. Yeah, I like that.
Fun is good. If we can't laugh in this world, there's only tears left. And I really appreciate your humor on your podcast. And so my final question is, if you could have one wish for a better world, Kaleem, when it comes to work and life, what would it be?
I would want every organization to be a people first organization. I would want every teammate, every manager, every individual contributor to think about people first. I think that's where we're heading. I think as AI increases and job tasks become less and less, we're going to become more cerebral beings. So, what about relationships and people?
Beautifully put. I absolutely love that. People, purpose, planet, all of the above, and profit will follow. But if it's the leader, then we have problems.
Oh no, we can keep talking. We'll cut it down. We'll cut it down. Yes.
So thank you, Kaleem. I think we covered a lot of territory. The thing is, I could have talked to you for an hour, but alas, we'll have to talk again. We'll have to talk again, and I'd love to, continue supporting the great work you're doing and be a continued voice for this myself, because I think fighting the good fight for workplace flexibility matters more than ever before. And remote work can't go away, because if remote work goes away, work-life integration suffers and mental health suffers, productivity, etc. So there's so many good reasons to keep fighting this good fight.
Yep. And the people want it. That's the other point. It's not going away because it can't go away because the people want it. So it's just, that's what it is. But thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
My pleasure, and stay well. Thank you for tuning into this episode of Where Work Meets Life. If you found this content valuable, please rate and review the episode and share with others who may benefit. Visit me on my website at drlaura.live and sign up for my monthly e-newsletter full of tips and resources. I'm also a passionate keynote speaker and would be delighted to speak with you on your speaking needs. Stay well.